Hello, and welcome to the September 2025 ENSO seminar. This will be our first seminar of the 25-26 academic year. And of course, I was speaking with Nara Figueiredo, who is our speaker today, and the year is only just getting started for me, but Nara is well into it at this stage. And so we're a mid-semester or mid-term event for Brazil, but just getting started here in Ireland, barely week zero, as I was saying. So I am delighted to welcome you here, Nara. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing your research with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. What an honor. And starting the term. Oh my God.
So for viewers, Nara is professor of philosophy and researcher at the Center for School and Human Sciences at the Federal University of Santa Maria. Nara has sort of extensive publications within sort of enactive philosophy. She did her PhD at the University of Sao Paulo and is now based, as I mentioned, at the University of Santa Maria. But you're also active, Nara, in the cognitive language team there, the writing group for women in philosophy, Brazilian Society of Analytic Philosophy, and the cognition, language, and enactivism and affectivity group. You're an active activist and active inactivist within the Brazilian research community and within the international research community. So absolutely delighted to have you join us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
So yeah, we will start as we often do with a brief commercial break, as it were, to sort of a little palate cleanser to get us started. But I think you have a slide to share with that, and after that, I think we'll be going straight into the talk. So without further ado, I'll invite you to start the commercial break, and then we can go straight into the talk on Enaction and Agential Realism in Dialogue about Language.
Okay, well, so this is what I prepared for the commercial break. I brought three papers that I worked on and that I'm happy about. The first one is not so recent, but it's we have said things in that paper that are always in the back of my mind, so it's always with me, this paper. So I'm happy to bring it to you. It's a paper that I wrote with a colleague, Professor Giovanni Hola. It's called Bringing Forth a World Literally. And the other two are more recent papers, one on participatory sense making and knowing in connection in VR, in which we talk about the constitutive role of affection and body identities that modulate relationships. And the other one, intentions and interactions, an inactive reply to expressive communication proposals, in which we talk about the co-authored nature of communicative intentions. And I would like to take this opportunity also to thank my co-authors, Professor Hola, Professor Vasconcelos, and Professor Cuffari. Okay, so that's it. That was the commercial. Okay, let's get social now. I'm gonna use this opportunity today to explore a few ideas that I have been thinking about for a while, in and off, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to bring this back to life because it was on hold for some time, which is a dialogue between the enaction theory and agential realism regarding the notion of meaning. So the question for what meaning is has been with me since, I don't know, I was an undergrad. And it is the question about the nature of the phenomena, right? But we have a more specific question, which is the question of what gives meaning to words. That is a question about the primary phenomena of language. This question, what gives meaning to words, has been addressed in different ways in the philosophy of language, but this is also very dear in philosophy of linguistics. And here I have an overview of, it's a chart. It's of course a very, it's a shallow way to put things in a way, because we are not going into specifics, but we can draw this picture in a very, I think it's fine. I'm comfortable with this. We can classify three kinds of answers that linguists have been offered us to the question of what gives words meaning. Essentialists have been said that these are intuitions of grammaticality and literal meaning. Externalists have said that they are actual utterances as produced by language users. And emergentists have said that we should look at facts of social cognition, interaction, and communication. So, as an enactivist, you look at this. If I have to pick one, I'm going to the one on my right here. I'm going to go with the emergentists, right? But there are things that seem to be missing in the sense, well, what about the body? What about what we feel? What about what we're experiencing? What about several other aspects that are also in play there? So we want to propose an enactive understanding of meaning as a relational process that encompasses the differences and crossings between linguistic bodies. And in order to do that, we are going to start from the basic tenets of the enactive theory, right? Sense-making, participatory sense-making, and languaging. And then we're going to resort to key ideas of agential realism to explore if they help us to clarify a little bit of the processes in which we engage in when we are languaging. So I'm going to talk about intra-action, the diffraction process, which involves superposition and interference, and the lightning phenomena that there is a very good explanation given by Barad about it. Okay, I'm just going to go through the basic enactive tenets very quickly because I'm assuming our audience is familiar with this. So in the enactive view, the living body is a self-producing and self-maintaining precarious and adaptive system that enacts or brings forth relevance. We are sense-making beings. We are linguistic bodies. We humans certainly are linguistic bodies. Precarious process of individuation of the flow of self and other directed utterances in coupling with dialogic engagements and all kinds of social interaction. We are participatory sense-making beings. In this picture, languaging is an activity that arises out of the tensions of participatory sense-making and help us manage them. We find and create these acts and tools and we manage them. We do that across our domains of bodily autonomy, organic, sensory, motor, intersubjective. But languaging is also a dynamic. It is a set of complex and dynamic practices of participatory sense makers, and it involves turn-taking, role-changing, self-directedness, and more importantly to us, symbolizing. What is symbolizing? There is a paper that I hope it comes out very, very soon, in which we talk way more about this, about the emergence of symbolism, and that I didn't bring to the advertisement part today. But in symbolizing, we stabilize our meanings. So symbolizing is it's part of a dynamics of languaging. And we produce these meanings, we use these meanings, and we are sensitive to them. So languaging as a practice is something that we do and develop. And as a dynamics, it's something that happens between us or in between us. It's the dynamics in which we practice or in which we participate, in which we take part. What about meaning? So let's see what Barad says about that. Meaning is neither intralinguistically conferred nor simply extralinguistically referenced. Meaning is made possible through specific material practices. So agential realism promises to offer us a clear and consistent view of material discursive practices. It is a truly relational account of that. It takes materiality and discursivity and puts it together as a process that involves both. So let's engage with agential realism. As I said, we're going to resort to three key ideas: intra-action, the diffraction process, and the lightning bolt phenomena. Intra-action signifies the mutual constitution of entangled agencies. With intra-action, we recognize that distinct agencies do not precede, but rather emerge through their interaction. So it's a relational ontology in the sense that we're saying there aren't objects or individuals or agencies, and then they get into relation. There aren't relations first, and then we have objects. At the same point in which identities or agencies emerges together the relations they are in or engaged in, right? And this is very inactivist, right? So when saying interaction, we think the linguistic bodies, when saying interaction and acknowledging that we are made of others, it's actually saying intra-action. It's not using this term, it's not using this word, but it acknowledges the very principles Barad is addressing when using this label. And Barad says that the notion of interaction is a general term that speaks to the nature of being, and it can also be used, we're going to see in a minute, in the social domain. So if we consider the human interaction in this picture, using the notion of interaction, this helps us to highlight the mutual constitution of our linguistic agencies. We are part of the constitution of others and vice versa. Now let's look at diffraction. Diffraction has to do with the way waves combine when they overlap and the apparent bending and spreading of waves when they encounter an obstruction. Barad uses diffraction and interference interchangeably. There's some debate about this, but here we're gonna follow them. The idea with diffraction here is that instead of a picture of cognition as a reflection of nature, we should be considering cognition as a process in which we actively engage, in which we are part of it, we contribute to it. We are interfering with the world when we are in it, and we are always in it. So let's just look at this explanation here. It is drawing just to have a better picture of it. So this is the traditional explanation of diffraction in physics. So you think about the light source here on your left, and then the light goes through the two holes there. Once it goes through the holes, it spreads, right? So this is diffraction, but also it crosses one another. It superposes one another. And this superposing is a kind of merging, right? And in this process of superposing, they become something else, right? And they create these patterns here. So you can see that the result of this interference here offers a pattern of light intensity in this case. And the waves can superpose in different ways. You can increase the pattern or increase the result or decrease the result depending on if they are destructive or constructive waves. Anyways, the important point for us here is whenever there is superposition, whenever the waves cross each other, there is interference. In actively engaging and constituting the reality we live in, we interfere. And as I said, diffraction is, Barad says, an effective tool for thinking about social natural practices as well in a performative rather than representationalist view. If we consider human interaction in this picture, the notion of diffraction for understanding, we can use it for understanding our agential role in the world. And in doing that, recognize interference. It's a dynamics always in play in our actions. It's a process of constantly self and other crossings and constantly interfering with each other. We are interfering in the co-creating of meaning and of each other's selves. Now let's look at the lightning bolt phenomenon. A lightning bolt is not a straightforward resolution. It does not simply proceed from storm cloud to the earth along a unidirectional path. The path that lightning takes not only is not predictable, but does not make its way according to some continuous unidirectional path between sky and ground. It is a process of iterative intra-activity. It's erratic, it's unpredictable. It is a repetitive process of co-constitution. And here I brought a few pictures that illustrate this very, very, very well. These are actual pictures, right? So you have the clouds there, a very excited medium, and you have the earth here, also an excited medium, and there are, strikes, upward leaders coming from earth to sky, downward leaders coming from sky to earth, and you have strikes at some point. Here we have a lightning rod that somehow modulates the process, but here we don't, and we can see, can you see my cursor actually? Yeah, okay. And you can see that the excitation is everywhere and it's kind of convergent here and there. So we can talk about two underdetermined poles of activity toward each other. And determination, and I'm going to say meaning, I'm going to say that later, happens in the encounter of these two underdetermined poles. So let's consider that in human interaction. The lightning bolt phenomena shows us that there are many possible forms of connection, that there is this iterative interactivity happens between us. If we take agents to be in a relationship like the clouds and the earth, in which the cloud is the producer and the earth is the audience of a meaningful act, we immediately see what an activist has been proposing, that the actions of those agents are mutually determining, mutually contributing with each other in a particular participatory sense-making. Okay, so let's put these two together. I think the notion of interaction there is for me, I'm very comfortable with that. We can discuss that, but these two, it's like, okay, but how do things relate? How am I putting this together? So let's bring interference on the one hand and iterative interactivity on the other hand. Does it mean that when we put this together, these are possible ways of interfering. Maybe, maybe not. If we take the superposition idea and apply to the lightning analogy, we take that meaning, and here I'm taking the strike as being meaning, is in the producer and audience crossings, in their entanglement, in the very relationship enacted by them. So imagine again that picture of explaining the diffraction process. Our agencies are crossing, they are superposing and interfering with each other. And in this process of interference, there are strikes. So the superposition works for us because of the lightning bolt analogy. Our agencies superpose and they affect each of us in different ways. This means that we have possible ways of sense making, and in sense making, we interfere with each other. So one claim that the agencies superpose and interfere with each other is a claim about ourselves, our processes of becoming. And the other claim that our sense makings strike and we produce it participatively or participatorily, I'm not sure in English what is the right one. This is a claim about the processes we are involved in, the dynamics, the linguistic dynamics, the languaging as a dynamic, as selves. I'm just going to give you a very simple example to call attention to what is it that I'm meaning in practice, right? So imagine these two people. The guy invited the girl to go to a cafe, and she wants to lighten the mood and makes a joke. Oh, my butt hurts. And the listener takes it as a complaint about the quality of the chair, and maybe, oh, maybe that was not the right place to bring her, or something. So it might be taken as a joke or not. And the same sentence said by another person with another tone, another friend, for example, in a similar situation could constitute and be taken as a joke by the listener. Also, the same sentence said by the same person with the same tone in a similar situation, but listened by another person, could constitute and be taken as a joke. This means that who speaks matters. What this person has done before also matters. What people can do afterwards matters. What people think of what that also matters. Ultimately, we're talking about the nature of meaning. Meaning is a dynamics in activities of change, of constantly transforming. We focus on how this dynamic is constitutive of the processes we are involved in and of ourselves. A dynamics that affords the stabilizing of directions and inclusions and exclusions. So coming back to our chart there, we, instead of getting into the third column, we're gonna create a fourth one. And in the fourth column, we're gonna say, maybe an activist think that what gives words meaning are situated agents interfering with each other in an iterative, and I put recursive here because I want to explore the differences and similarities between iterativity and recursivity. I didn't do this here, but this is something that I'm looking into. An iterative practice of marking and reapplying or reinstating acts and symbolic acts, sounds, gestures, or writing, drawings, imprinting, living things, not living things, etc. So we are talking about relational co-constituting practices. That's it for today.
That's wonderful. That's super, Nara. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I'll have to confess, I have vested interests here. I too have a real interest in the work of Barad and how their work can be used to complement and enrich inactive thinking. So there's so many different things that I want to get into, but I, as ever, would prefer to hear voices other than my own at this stage of the discussion. So Mason, I see you there. I don't know if you're ready to, if you have particular questions you want to ask. I do have a question in the chat to relay into the conversation at some point as well. So Mason, I'll let you kick off the
I haven't
question.
seen the question in the chat. Hope I'm not stepping on any toes. I'm not really familiar with Barad's work. You're mentioning it in your abstract got me sort of digging through it this morning, just as preparation, and it seems fascinating and interesting. I'm wondering. I'm going back to I mean, should Winograd and Flores in '86 talking about understanding computers and cognition are sort of explaining language and cognition as a biological phenomenon, Maturana and Varela and Heidegger and so on, have a similar kind of analogy to the lightning one that you were using, talking about like a roadmap and why the roads go in the particular way they are. That you understand the road as like following the direction of a river, trying to go over this particular mountain. It's a function of like the landscape and the people and why these particular people and these particular kinds of vehicles want to get from here to here. To understand why the road goes in the way it does, you need to understand the sort of social, physical, interactive human context of the whole thing. So the lightning metaphor seems very similar to that kind of analogy that I've been playing with for a while. But I'm wondering, I mean, it seems like it does a similar job. So I'm wondering what Barad's sort of, I guess, intra-action. I'm trying to understand that term and what it adds to the sort of interaction. You and I having a conversation, you make a move, I make a move in response. What I say is conditioned and constrained and influenced by what you say, and we go back and forth on this sort of interactive game dance. That in part what you say prompts the kinds of moves in a conversation that are open to me. This seems like interaction, but you're using Barad's sort of intra-action as though but maybe this is the question about my understanding of that term. There's a system that constitutes a sort of social historical context of the linguistic community and these particular two agents, and you're thinking of intra as intra to that system. So that you and I form a system as we have a conversation, and the actions within that system are what you're trying to model here. Is that fair?
Yes, but also I read it. No, I mean, maybe that's not right. I don't know. I read it as into the agency that instantiates in the process as well. So it's intra if you consider two agencies, but intra as well, considering the boundaries or whatever of each element of the relationship. I would read it in this way. And also, I'm trying to if I got your question right, the river and map analogy and how the
There was not really, there was a sort of, but these analogies and sort of metaphors seem to be doing similar kinds of work. And the part where I'm sort of
I'm
a
not
little
sure.
confused is what intra-action, as sort of emphasizing that as opposed to interaction, adds to this. It seems like there's something there that I'm not quite grasping yet about the notion of intra-action as opposed to interaction. Um, intra implies within a system as opposed to between two different things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
which
yeah.
which seems, I guess, what sort of participatory sense making and languaging and so on do for like De Paolo and so on. The system might be you and I in a conversation together. We
Yeah,
have a conversation and think through these ideas. Is that
yeah.
what intra-action means here, or is intra-action
No,
adding something more that I'm not seeing?
it's more than that. It means that me talking to you here affects me in um, constitutive way all the time. We affect each other, and we are each other, made of each other. I think it means that we are constitutively, we are in a process of becoming, constantly in a process of becoming, And this means that it's also in the sense that it's in the limits of whatever these limits are, that are flexible and maybe of my agency. Yeah. So I think it's stronger than inter.
I apologize for interrupting. I'm just wondering. So I have I'd love to dig into this a little bit further. I have a question in the chat, and I just want to assure that I will get to that. I have a question here that comes up for me, I guess, quite a bit when reading Barad and trying to think of their work in terms of inactive thinking. And because it's just wanted to follow up a little bit on it with you because of how central it is to how Barad describes agency in particular, and the very notion of agential realism, right? So, because on the one hand, inactive thinking would typically be considered, I guess, anti-realist for want of a much better, we don't want to get into labeling too much because it ends up sort of, we end up misrepresenting things. But there is a certain tension, I think, between the notion of intra-action. So as I understand it now, I'm going to pitch in my brief summary here, which may worsen the conversation, and I apologize if that's about to happen. But there is a holism ultimately to the universe, that everything is connected to everything else, and boundaries are always decisions rather than certainties that are just present prior to observation and or enactment. Although Barad doesn't specifically use the term enactment, I think that they may as well.
Some point I think they do.
So at some
point they do. I read. I'm like, oh, how nice.
All the residents. So one of the issues, of course, that arises then is that at any given time, if we want to identify an agent, we have to make a distinction. And there is a sort of, I guess, I wonder, is there a potential tension there? So for Barad, the agent is created in the moment of distinction making. And we essentially define the agent at the same time as we defined the system that we are measuring, because one gives rise to the other. And I guess there's a perception at least of a tension with inactive thinking, because self-distinction is supposed to make the agent stable and real without wanting to say real. Excuse me, in a way that's kind of less relativistic, right? So, and this is kind of ironic because I've been in conversations with inactive thinkers who don't like Barad's work because they're a realist with agential realism, but at the same time, intra-action would actually seem to suggest that maybe adaptive precarious autonomy isn't the kind of foundation that inactive theory would like to use it as. And I guess, do you see that tension? Do you kind of feel that it plays a kind of role here? And is there any concern that we're going to, this is deep inside baseball in action, but is there any concern that there's a possible dissolving of that inactive foundation in favor of something else we know not what?
No, I've seen this from the beginning, and I think agential realism has a strong commitment with agency as a phenomena that it's very everywhere, like matter has agency. And this is something that I didn't think that I needed to do that for this topic, but this is something that I want to do, go into the specifics of the definitions of the Paolo and Barad there, but I don't know if about agency and the three conditions of normativity and symmetry and so forth, and compare and then extract a notion of a more systematic notion of agency from Barad. because I think this is it's a parallel debate to biopsychism and panpsychism. You have panagentialism at some point, and then bioagentialism at another point, right? And as Evan Thompson told us, well, there is no way to actually decide between panpsychism and biopsychism, but let's go with biopsychism, right? So this is something that I want to look into it, and I do see the tension. I'm not ready to embrace what is I'm naming panagentialism here. And I think it's possible to to uh, to keep this dialogue and not necessarily commit to this notion of agency that is very, very generous, let's put it this way. Yeah.
No, I fully agree. I think there is. I'm always curious to try and elucidate a little bit further. But I guess there's a couple of things that you said there brought out some other themes, and I guess this is a potentially an opportunity to bring in the question from Ralph Banel. I apologize if I am mispronouncing either of those names. But through the chat, Ralph asks, can this analysis be applied to non-verbal utterances? Something given a lot of attention in linguistic bodies, and they know that your last slide maybe answered the question as a yes there. But I guess there's an opportunity to maybe expand a little bit further on how meaning of nonverbal gestures is it negotiated in precisely the same way? Is there some unique characteristics to the nonverbal that are worth noting?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. I think what it comes to my mind is this. There are usually way more misunderstandings in verbal language than in non-verbal language. And I think that they are always enmeshed, right? Unless you're reading, but yeah, in interaction, they're always there all the time. Non-verbal is there all the time. So I think yes, the quick answer would be yes. It could be applied to non-verbal language as well. I'm not sure why I would do that, because why it helps us to apply it to verbal language. It helps us because it shows how many intricacies that that the involvement of our bodies in verbal language take that or carry that we should address. In nonverbal language, yeah, maybe as well. Because you have, different kinds of behaviors and appearances and social asymmetries. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But I never thought about that. Yeah.
There might be an interesting continuum, of course.
Yeah.
So can I just check one thing actually, and this is a little bit of a follow-up and a little bit of a separate question. Just to grasp one aspect of the analogy perhaps a little bit, and that is around the role of symbols. So if I'm hearing, I'm kind of listening to you correctly, then if we take the lightning bolt phenomenon, then essentially a word is like a lightning conductor. It is a means of trying take a situation which will always be messy and provide
A rod.
right? So here's a way of trying to produce some determinism within this very underdetermined system.
Yes.
And it was like I encountered it just a moment ago when I don't know, when we were trying to say, well, is an active approach a realist or an anti-realist approach? And of course, the words aren't quite right, but as soon as we brought them into the conversation, they summon all of the context and the history, and they start to overdetermine what can happen from thereafter. So if
Yeah.
we choose different words, we leave certain things open, but the conversation is much messier and hard to negotiate, which is I perhaps how so many people experience the research literature in Enaction, because the inactivists are trying very hard not to use words that will overdetermine the reader's response before they've had a chance to say something new. But the reader then is left going, what does this mean? What does any of this mean? Until they get to a point where it all suddenly makes sense all at once. And I guess is that fair? Is that kind of notion of symbols as lightning rods
I
part of
like it.
technology or
Yeah. I mean, we have many and we combine them, but I think it's worth investing in this, I think. Do you want to work together on this?
sure.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's there's a follow-up from Ralph actually, regarding, and right, this is an interesting point about boundaries. Excuse me. A lot of developmental psychologists talk of children internalizing language and meaning into a private language as a principal mechanism for cognitive development. Do you think your analysis can throw light on this idea of internalization? Is it necessary to reject it from an active perspective, or is there something more to say here?
Yeah, those rods are what is yeah, I don't want to grab into the internalization thing. These are practices that we start. So when a child learns a language, it's being immersed into a practice, right? We don't have to commit to this. Well, this is an inner language or this is a private language. Yeah, it's not private. There is no such thing as this, I think this is an illusion actually that we think of ourselves as selves with a special, it comes from rationalism as special having inner worlds, but this can be thought of as, look, we have been engaging in processes with others all our lives since birth, and we are able to do it without we don't need to complete the action at some point once we are trained enough on it, right? So I start saying, I don't know, water, I want water, and then at some point I don't have to say it in order to mean it. And this is what we call the inner world. So I don't think we have to accept. This doesn't mean that we don't have epistemic privacy. This doesn't mean, right? But I wanted to demystify a little bit this heavy weight that we have on our inner world, and then we get insane with that.
Okay, my mind's a little blown actually, because I hadn't thought about it in quite that way before, and I think it's a really interesting and possibly a very compelling way. So, what is the very notion of internal monologue, of a private first person point of view is simply a whole bunch of interactive and participatory skills that are so well practiced they don't have to be expressed in a kind of deliberate or reflective or purposive manner. And so it's just it's not internalized, it's just that's it, well practiced, it's fluent, I guess, for want of a potentially very relevant phrase, a very relevant term here.
Yeah,
so in the same way I go from, or just like from conscious and deliberate driving to fluent, don't care, well, hopefully care, but care quietly driving, where I don't have to put the thought into gear shifts and indicators and all that kind of thing. Except, we can do this for language or planning how to get from, walk from my office to the canteen or similar. And perhaps it's one of the reasons why children won't shut up.
If I can just add to this, I mean, I was sort of thinking about this developmental perspective the whole time you were talking, and particularly the last slide you had, we sort of talk about situated agents interfering with each other in a recursive iterative practice of making, reapplying, restating. Sorry, I've got my notes here. Acts of symbolic acts, gestures, whatever. The sort of relational co-constitutive practices you're talking about here start with infants. And I mean, you're brought into this practice by learning these skills of sort of interacting with others and eventually learning to like think without saying every thought out loud. So children won't show up, like you said, Mary. So the sort of recursive induction into a practice that you're talking about here, particularly the co-constitutive part of it, can't just be when you and I first meet and have a conversation. We've both been immersed in linguistic cultures that have a lot of overlap and intersection. This is how we can talk to each other. We both share language. Means sharing a set of linguistic practices and induction into those practices, norms about the proper use of words and certain kind of contexts and so on. All of that is mutually co-constitutive. But you have to be telling a relational story about how we came to have these skills, that kind of co-constitutive, which is not just me and the other people, but me and the stuff we interact with, the things we talk about, the things we ask people for and request and forbid and so on. So when I pick up a pen, sorry, my green screen's making it weird. Pick up a pen here. I mean, I can talk about this knowing what kind of object it is, knowing that it's for writing with. There's this functionality to the pen that we've all learned that constrains what we can say about it and do with it. That whole linguistic practice involved our objects and our goals and the kinds of things one typically does in a situation like we are currently in, and learning those kinds of norms as well. So this whole sort of snowballing linguistic practice involves us and our objects and our purposes and goals and everything else. So when you're talking developmentally like that, I mean, the sort of, I worry that the sort of interactive piece you're getting from, what's her name again? Barad? Focuses a little more on the sort of here and now part of co-constitutive as we have a conversation, as opposed to the long-term developmental, how do we get to be able to have a conversation side of things, which all of the descriptions apply here, but we really need to sort of emphasize the sort of developmental story about how a child becomes able to participate in these practices and learn these norms and conventions and so on.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. If I gave the impression that just talking about the moment,
no, this is mostly you need to emphasize this more because it's there, but it needs to be saying much more about the developmental side as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think
and this also, I think, gets to sorry, I'm going to change topics very slightly. The realism you were talking about earlier on, that the idea that we co-constitute a world, bring forth a world by perceiving it, tracking it, interacting with it. The aspect of realism I'm seeing in Barad from your descriptions of it in the brief review I read of it this morning seems to be a little more, I mean, you can't deny there is a world out there. There is stuff that we interact with. But the sort of intra-active part of this is about like one part of the system tracking another part of the system. I, as a
Yeah.
cognitive agent, look at that thing over there and want to re-identify it later and talk about it and interact with it. This is where we get sort of knowledge. This is why epistemology and ontology and also ethics, sure, all need to be done together. The world we talk about doesn't determine our practices, but it constrains them. This is why I like the roadway metaphor a little better than the lightning. The roadway, as a sort of laying down a track, involves human purposes and goals, but also constrained by the landscape. There's a river here; it's easier that way. There's a mountain here; it's hard to go that way. So that sort of tracks we lay down as we learn to interact with each other and interact with the real world out there and real other people out there. We're finding our way, getting a grip on the world, which is really there. Realism, in that sense of there is a world for us to get a grip on, is quite different from the sort of anti-realism. There's nothing can be said true about the world. It's all internal to our practices. That sort of anti-realism, in the sense of like internal to everything is internal to our practices, is quite different from the acknowledgement that there is a world out there that we're trying to get a grip on. So realism in that latter sense of trying to get a grip on a world that is really out there is quite different from the sort of realism that many anti-realists resist. You can be an anti-realist in that sense while still admitting there is a world out there and we try to get a grip on it, right?
Okay, let me see if I follow that.
Okay.
So the English is a little fast.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I have an accent, it's even worse.
No, it's fine, it's fine. It's just, so I'm thinking about the maybe differences between the river and the lightning bolt analogy. And what I wanna highlight with the lightning bolt is that it's more than, look, I'm going and there are boundaries and my actions help to create these boundaries and establish these boundaries. It's more than that. It's that I'm going and there's also something else coming. And these are two kind of indefinite. And they are only defined in the encounter.
Mhm.
It's a little more difficult to think about this when you think about a road or a river, because it's matter, right? We are kind of,
Well, I mean,
it must be
Christian,
there
when
before
you're having this encounter with the other, you're talking about another person, or are
another
you also
person.
talking about the objects we interact with and talk about together?
For now, I'm talking about another person, but I have to think more about that. Yeah, because if I commit to objects, I think I'm gonna go all the way to panagentialism. I would have to. I'm not sure
Uh,
if I want to pay this price yet.
I'm not sure you'd have to pay. I mean, that's a pretty steep price.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, to say that like there is an object like this pen that we can talk about, we know what it's for, we can interact with it together. If I said this and you said that elephant, I don't know what to do with that. There's a sort of constraint that the object we're talking about and interacting with and looking at together constrains, interacts with, interferes with, sure, to take that metaphor, our conversation. That our conversation can't just go anywhere when we're in a particular physical and social context.
yeah,
So the context is there and constrains and it shapes the way the lightning bolt forms in this particular path.
yeah,
You don't have to attribute agency to the terrain around us to
yeah,
recognize that it sort of interferes with, interacts with, shapes conversation, right?
yeah, yeah. Barad does though. That's why I'm saying this. Yeah, but yeah.
So the follow-up from online here, does that defining character of the encounter leave something that has to be negotiated? So
Can you
in
repeat
this
that?
case, that defining character of the encounter leave something, reality, that has to be negotiated? Excuse me.
Leave something that has to be negotiated. So the result of the encounter, meaning the strike?
Yeah, so I guess that moment where things are determined.
Yeah.
I mean, when the guy pulled a knife on Crocodile Dundee and Crocodile Dundee says, that's not a knife. We're negotiating the meaning of knife right here.
I think so, right? I mean, because the strike is one moment and you don't have to stabilize that into a word, a meaning, or something. But what is common to happen is that you see patterns emerging from the interference, right? And it's many times difficult to, because it's like the patterns themselves, they kind of lead you to what is gonna be, and sometimes you can negotiate it, sometimes you can't. Many times you can't, I think.
So,
That's very, abstract what I'm saying. It's just
yeah.
yeah.
But it does, I think it makes a lot of sense because as you say, the strike is just a moment.
Mhm.
The world is always bigger than that moment. There is never a final action. There is always going to be, every action is going to be partial in some way. So you were sort of hinting towards, of course, I think this enacted literature on habits and the formation of routines and on Ralph Online here has talked about sedimentation of actions and the creation of material culture then, which has again the kind of shaping, determining, stabilizing force, all of which in order to like if behavior, if our activity and our actions at any given time are so potentially malleable, then a huge part of perhaps the what the problem evolution must solve, for want of a better question, or a better way of phrasing it, is how do you stabilize behavior into something that can allow sense making to happen? And of course, all of these stabilizing, there'll be so many of these different stabilizing tools and resources built up over time through bodies taking certain shapes, through cultural practices, being sedimented into routines and through individuals developing skills and habits and so on, which make all of this possible. And of course, from a different perspective, they become the assumed ground from which you start cognitive science. But from an enactive perspective, it's like, no, we've got to stable all of this, please. Can we get that done first? So it's fascinating the way just all of these things keep spilling out of what starts off as a very focused question for yourself, which was meanings of words. And now but I guess this is part and parcel of the everything is connected to everything else character of enactive thinking.
Indeed, yeah. Wow, very nice.
So I appreciate we are very much close to the end of time. So if I want to, I guess it sounded like I was having the last word there, which I'd prefer not to. If Nara, if there is anything you would like to add or conclude, please do. But
Okay.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna, because many times I keep thinking about this, and I talk to Elena so much, and many times I think, oh yeah, this is really enlightening, and I think about the situations that I live in that I experience, and how with some people you just tune into, and with other people it's difficult sometimes. You try it over and over again. So many times I think, well, that's very enlightening to think about this interaction. In this sense, the strikes were kind of in this way, and I couldn't modulate more, and the more I try, the more the thing goes astray. And but then sometimes I'm like, am I creating so much, there's so much metaphysics into this? What is it that to explain the process? So I'm really glad to be talking to you here about this, and to see that some of it makes sense to you as well. Yeah, I'm really happy about it. Thank you very much, Marek and Mason.
Thanks, Nara.
Thanks a million. Well, look, it's been an absolutely wonderful way to kick off this particular series of ENSO seminars. So thank you very much, Nara, for the talk and for the discussion. And we'll bring things to a close there. So thanks to everyone. I hope people watching have enjoyed the conversation. And we will see you in about a month's time for another ENSO seminar.
Okay. See you.
Now, so we are